Mr. Cummings.
Mr. Lewis, I've listened to your testimony very carefully, and you know, I understand, and I've read a lot about you. You're a great man, but I think one of the things that you have tried to do today is to walk a very thin line. You just heard Republicans and Democrats say, to some degree, that whatever was said to you about losing your job and the board being dismissed, basically what we've said is we don't buy it. I assume the minutes are accurate from your board meetings. Are these things you vote on? The minutes from board meetings?
Yes, sir. We do.
Very well. I'm talking about, this is December 22nd, 2008.
Yes. Right.
Let me read something to you. It says, you've apparently, Mr. Lewis reported a series of calls, but let me go down to, and you talk about a number of things, but this is one thing that I found very interesting. The second point, it says that this is what you told your board. It says the Treasury and the Fed stated strongly that were the corporation to invoke the material adverse change, a MAC clause in the merger agreement with Merrill Lynch and fail to close the transaction, the Treasury and the Fed would remove the board and management of the corporation. If that isn't a threat, I don't know what is. If I say I'm going to fire you if you don't do what I tell you to do, not only am I going to fire you, but I'm going to fire your board, it just goes, I mean, what you said, and I know that you were caught in a difficult situation. I know that after this merger was done, your folks benefited tremendously, and I know that Bank of America is doing fine now. But I'm here to tell you that no matter how great Bank of America is doing today, the end does not, the means does not justify the end. In other words, throughout these transactions, we must have honesty, integrity, and transparency, period. And so what I'm saying to you is I know you're trying to be nice, but here we've got a situation where apparently Mr. Paulson has told you, do it. Sort of like the Nike commercial. Just do it. And then you come in here trying to tell us, oh no, I was worried, sky was falling. I was just so upset. And we don't buy it. So I'm going to give you another chance. You didn't feel threatened?
Well,
I mean, don't get us to describe it. We're trying to figure out what you were feeling. And you know why we want to know? Because we want to straighten out this mess.
I've been pretty consistent as you just described it as it happened.
Yeah, well, maybe you need to be inconsistent and tell us how you felt.
Well, I did, as I think I have said at some point in time, maybe not today. It was a strong influence on my decision, but it wasn't the only influence.
I understand. Now, so apparently you're going to, okay. Now, let me ask you this. Did Mr. Bernanke have any influence with regard, I mean, I understand you just answered the question, but did he ever say that you should not disclose certain information, you should do this deal? I mean, did that ever come to you in any kind of way from Bernanke?
No, sir. He never said we should not disclose anything that was disclosable. That would be our decision, and I never heard from him on the issue of us not disclosing something.
All right. Well, anything else? You just look like you're trying to go somewhere. Go ahead.
Well, the second piece I thought that you asked me, sir, was the issue of him not wanting us to call the MAC, and he did express that to us.
And so when did he do that?
He expressed it on more than one occasion. I don't remember which dates, but several times.
And last but not least, you are an experienced man. I understand you have great judgment. Apparently, when you thought about this MAC thing, it was based upon your own experiences, was it not?
Yes, sir.
You just don't say, I think we may have a MAC here, and out of the clear blue sky. What were you thinking?
I was thinking that the losses had accelerated to a point that they were out of line with other institutions and our institution.
And so you still, now if you were to go back, you think there was not a MAC situation?
I wouldn't change my decision, but I can't say that there wasn't a MAC because we never called it, so we just don't know.
Very well. I see my
Mr.
time is
If
up.
the gentleman would yield for a moment.
My time is up.
The gentleman's time has expired. I now yield to Congressman Flake from Arizona. Congressman Flake for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just want to share my colleagues' skepticism here about whether or not this was a threat. It just seems completely incredulous that this wouldn't be considered a threat. If this wouldn't be considered a threat, if I might just ask you, what would be considered a threat? I mean, kidnap the family dog, release your college GPA scores. What is a threat if this is not a threat? Firing and the firing of your board.
Well, I'm just trying to describe the circumstances and not put one word to it myself.
All right. Well, it seems from this vantage point, it seems there's sort of a kind of a Stockholm syndrome thing going here. I mean, you're still regulated by these entities, and it seems that you've identified with your captors or your regulators in some way here. But we'd like to have a candid answer here. And I don't know if you can wiggle your pinky finger at us or something, or give some sign that that nobody else will see. But it just
Maybe it's just a big grin.
The big grin. Maybe that's giving it away. But it just, let me just tell you, from this vantage point, it just seems very difficult to accept that would not seem threatening behavior. Again, from the notes that I believe Mr. Price, the CFO, took during one of these meetings, identifies Hank Paulson here, fire board if you do not do, or if you do it, invoke the MAC, irresponsible for the country. Tim G. agrees. I mean, it just seems like there's no other explanation here. And I can understand maybe from the smile and whatnot that you agree but can't say it here. But let me just say, if you learned later on that there was $12 billion in losses that you didn't know about, but you said that they were compelling, it wasn't so much what they said but how they said it, the seriousness of which they explained the need for you to move forward with this merger. If not $12 billion, where's the threshold that you would have said can't do it? Can you enlighten us there a bit?
I can't. Because I dealt with the circumstances that that existed, and I don't know if I don't think there's a rule of thumb or whatever to cause that to happen. But to your point, even if whatever you want to call it, I wouldn't change how I described it. So I'll let you put the word to whether it was a threat or whatever, but the circumstances that I described remain the same.
Well, how compelling was the seriousness of that conversation? Would it have compelled you if the losses were twice as big as you didn't understand that they were? If $24 billion instead of 12? Well,
at some point, you couldn't have made it a viable deal. So there is at some point a number that the hole would have been just too big.
But if the taxpayers backfill, 24 is just as easy as 12.
No, sir, because you would all of a sudden have. Remember, this is 8% after-tax dividends that you're paying, and at some point you just couldn't bear the burden of that kind of cash flow drain.
But the $12 billion was within the range.
Within the range. I mean, it was painful, and it caused us to have to push out our horizon in terms of accretion for the deal to work. But it was workable.
Thank you.
Mr. Flake.
I would yield to the gentleman from California.